China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitola Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
How 同学们，我们在光光烈烈的站起来，站起来。Ladies and gentlemen, chances are Xi Jinping will soon be crowned Emperor of China. Given all the power that title confers, what will he do? Invade Taiwan? Annex the moon? Whatever is going to happen will happen. Is the United States prepared with a well-conceived and coordinated China strategy? Or are we just fooling around? Welcome out there. This is China Watch Radio, the China versus the World edition of the China Watch Radio. Team today, we have Susan Simon on the controls in the control room there, and on the phone, we have Bill Graff in the control here.
Hello.
Ready to go. We have David Welch, we have Jonty McCollyer up in the woods, and we have yours truly, Michael Olson. So each one of us has a handful of stories to work today. We're going to start off with kind of the general stories of the week. I'm going to lead off with a piece on the Maoism of Wokeism. David, what do you have for the first segment here?
I've got China's Ponzi-like property market is eroding faith in the government.
There you go. Billy, what do you have?
Well, I'm going to talk first about the coal power boom in China.
A coal power boom?
Maybe.
I guess that's something relating to ending global climate change and warming and all of that stuff. Jonty, up there in the trees, what do we have?
Well, I'm going to spend a little time examining China's debt relationship with a variety of countries, and we actually may have to re-examine some of our assumptions about it.
Ah, good. We like to re-examine things. It's our favorite thing to do.
By the way, before we kind of kick it off, I want to let you guys know I'm turbocharged today. I had a great acupuncture treatment just before the meeting. Yeah, that's great.
No, you're turbocharged because of the giant big gulp.
What's in there?
Mostly carbonated water.
Okay,
but, a little
some
bit of
sugar
flavoring.
and a little bit of this and a little bit
But
of that.
it's interesting, the gentleman who did it is from mainland China, and he said that if he'd worked on a number of COVID patients, and he had talked to his relatives and cohort back in China, he had said that if he had that same practice during the COVID period, that he would now be in jail.
Wow.
What does that mean? Why would he be in jail?
For breaking COVID protocol. You can't see patients.
Really?
Yes.
So how do you do acupuncture if you're not seeing patients?
We can,
you
but
do it virtually?
But you can't do it with COVID. So, he was actually treating people who've got maladies and they had COVID. And as you get the qi flowing in your system, with acupuncture, it does help your body heal itself quicker, right? And I believe in it. I think there's a component.
I do as well.
Our bodies are self-correcting if we treat them properly, and sometimes they need a little boost.
The perfect machine if we give it the chance to be the perfect machine.
Like a big gulp.
A big gulp. There it is. That works every time.
It is.
So I'm going to kick it off today, yours truly, Michael Olson, with the Maoism of Wokeism. And by the way, as I kick this off, a quick reminder that while I was studying Chinese at the University of California during the peak of the Cultural Revolution, so as part of my studies, I translated the poetry of Mao Zedong, the poetry he wrote while on the Long March. And the poetry he did write on the Long March was that of a young idealist socialist. One of his poems went something like this. Kunlun, which is the greatest mountain in China. Kunlun, if I could lean on my sword, I'd slice you into three. And I would send one part to America and one part to Russia and keep one part here so that we could all enjoy the magnificent power of your strength. And, it's really idealistic stuff, right?
Very dramatic.
But while I was doing that, I also saw firsthand, or as close as I could, the impact of Mao's Cultural Revolution.
Yeah.
a time in which he was literally starving to death millions and tens of millions of people. So I got two sides of Maoism, the young idealist and the mature
Realist?
realist,
Yeah.
you know. And it was that realization within me of what really happens when somebody gets ultimate power.
Sure.
That made me realize that I could never be part of that. So
There's no checks and balances.
no checks and balances. So,
Well, only one.
Yeah.
so this piece on the Maoism of wokeism is kind of a comparison of Mao's cultural revolution ethics and what we see happening here in the United States today. And the articles of this were a guy named David Jones and M.L.R. Smith. They wrote a book called The Strategy of Maoism, and I found a critique in it in American Greatness by Bruce Newsom. So it takes us back to 1966 when Chinese students started rebellion against reactionary teachers and courses. And of course, encouraged by Mao's encouragement to go out and get rid of the old fours. What were the old fours? Old ideas, old culture, old customs, old habits. Anything that was old was to be gotten rid of. And so they went out, toppled statues, arrested everybody that was old, if you were a successful business person, you were a target. If you were a university professor teaching English, you were guilty, and so on, and so on, and so on.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you remember the counterculture saying in the U.S. in the 60s, bring it all down, man?
Bring it all down, man.
Yeah.
So, and with that came, with that cultural revolution, though, that purification of that revolution came witch hunts, show trials, groveling apologies for vague crimes, overcompensatory denunciations of the other, oppressors pretending to be the oppressed, mobs pretending to be righteous, and the empowered pretending to be victims. Well, that sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yes.
So in January 2016, a guy named David Barnheiser, a law professor at Cleveland State University, posted a paper about the linguistic and methodological parallels between Mao's Cultural Revolution and on-campus political correctness. Well, by golly, I was a student in the California college system in the early 70s, a student body president, and I was every bit as engaged in this craziness as Mao's Red Guards were right here. So it translated well across the oceans there. So they talk a little bit about how Mao formulated his strategy and what it looks like here in the West. So I'll go through a few of the elements. First of all, first characteristic of Mao's wokeism. In 1926, Mao formulated a binary world of friends and enemies, us against them. If you're with us, we're for you. If you're against us, we're against you. Now, what I came to realize as a young revolutionary was that you could be in the in crowd one day and out the next day
was just gonna
with
say
no
that.
reason whatsoever.
That's right.
Fickle, yeah.
It's just completely fickle. And in China, you could be a revolutionary leader of the Red Guards one day, and you could be shoveling manure in the countryside the next day. And there was, as it was all personality based, without any law and order, anything could happen and did.
You know what's really funny about that observation on the global scale is it started here with all of us in grammar school.
What do you mean, Billy?
Well, one minute you're on the in crowd, and the next minute you're not.
You know, that's a very good
It's a human nature
perception,
piece,
too.
yeah.
If you had the right shoes,
That's right.
You're in the in
Hey,
crowd.
your lunchbox is cool. You're in.
You're in. Yeah.
Yeah.
You know?
That's very good, and that's the way it was.
Yeah.
And I was cool. I had a Hot Wheels lunchbox.
So with
I was
respect
never
to
cool.
how that became manifest in the Chinese Communist Party at the time was the rectification campaigns. So every few years, Mao would launch a campaign, gather up everybody who wasn't in the in crowd, and just get rid of them. Kaboop, gone. And so for years, they had the rectification campaigns, and you can see that today too.
Well, he even did it with sparrows. I mean,
Yes,
you know.
there you are.
Yeah.
The ultimate rectification campaign is Smashing the Sparrows campaign. The second characteristic of Mao's wokeism is endless conflict.
Yeah.
So nothing is ever going to be right. In fact, what Mao said is that, and I quote, "If there were no contradictions in the party and no ideological struggles to resolve them, the party's life would come to an end." So in saying that, he kind of laid the party's cards on the table. Revolution is in the party's self-interest, not society's, in the parties. If you're always fighting against something, that's what you're supposed to be doing.
Perpetual conflict.
Perpetual
Well, and
conflict.
change provides energy to the young who enter the base.
That's right.
Yeah.
And then the third characteristic is in Mao's On Coalition Government, he prescribes the washing of cultural pollution out of the common mind, just as one would wash dirty clothes. So the woke's imperative for change drive its demonstrative rage. We're always pissed off about something. Always pissed off. So what do? We rage against the machine, right?
Yeah.
And we're always raging. So, and you see what does that mean? If everything's going right, you got to find something that's going wrong. Where we really see a good manifestation of that today is the gender dysphoria, where
Well, that's one of the things. For
it's
sure.
one of the many things, but it's almost everything.
It's a great illustrator.
It is.
It's almost everything. So what we see, the radical left adopting these things, post-structural or post-structuralism or the denial of objectivity, men having babies, colonialism studies, or the denunciation of white people.
Aren't kids who are breastfed and all called chest feeders?
There you go.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, that's a new
We
term.
see human rights, the denial of liberty, human rights or the denial of liberty, and social justice or the denial of meritocracy. So those are kind of some of the ways Chairman Mao's communism is becoming manifest in wokeism today. As per the folks who wrote this article, I, of course, would not say that.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, I had one question for you, which was, how much are you enjoying this?
Yeah.
For the audience's sake, I saw this article and I immediately thought, oh, Michael's going to love this one.
When I read it, I thought the same thing.
Yeah. It was a great article, too. Mao's, the wokeism of Maoism. Give it a look. All right, who's up next?
On our website, ChinaWatchRadio.com.
Yeah, there you go.
There you go.
Click and read and enjoy. Who's up next?
I can take it.
David Webb.
Yeah.
Welch.
So China's Ponzi-like property market is eroding faith in the government. And I found this really fascinating. And I think a lot of folks in the audience can also kind of, I think, understand this clearly as well. The illustration comes from The Economist, and I was really impressed with the way they had kind of illustratively put this together in words. A 120-kilometer train ride between the cities of Luoyang and Zhenghao is a showcase of economic malaise and broken dreams. From the window, endless half-built residences tower past the other, one after another, for the duration of the hour-long journey.
Hour-long train ride.
You know, a lot of us have seen the transitions of industries in the United States. We've driven through the Rust Belt taken, transportation through. And it's interesting to watch, this type of economic chaos strike the countryside. I mean, we've had highlights here in this program of, areas that have been, depleted, right, economically depleted because of housing. But it's interesting now it's actually hitting such wide swaths of the country. It's fascinating.
And what kind of country is that? Farmland.
Yes.
It's always the best farmland, right?
Well, that's where it starts.
Because it's already paved and level.
It's all not paved, it's all
plowed and leveled. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, developers have run out of cash. They can no longer pay for the workers. The projects have stalled. And, of course, the investors or the customers are unwilling to put additional money into the project because they don't know if it's good money after bad or if it actually go to fix their unit.
And this is the mortgage
the mortgage crisis.
Strike.
Yeah, basically the mortgage strike. Yes, it's the laydown, as you described it, Michael, on a previous show. So they've got sentiment ratings and indexes like we do here for consumer sentiment, right? And so sentiment currently in the housing market at its peak in 2021, just last year, was about 128 points. Today that total is 75.
Wow.
So it's like a 40-point swing,
almost 50
to the negative, which is really catastrophic. I mean, you think about this country when we look at leading economic indicators, and we've got an indicator that's off 5-6 points. It's, our hair's on fire.
Yeah, if 50-point swing in the stock market around here is devastating.
Yeah.
Well, people no longer have a place to put their money.
Well,
if you think about it,
that's right. That's right, Michael. Yeah.
The real estate was the bedrock of where you put your money, and now it's gone.
Yeah.
Well, to kind of understand the truth of what's going on here, and it reinforces what Billy had just mentioned. New project starts have fallen by 45% in July compared to a year ago.
Wow.
So not only, of course, it makes sense you're not going to build more if you can't finish what you've got, but the value of new home sales. It's interesting. The value of new home sales by 29% of the property investment went from 29% to 12%. So it was just as kind of a ratio.
Wow. That's
and
cut
those who can afford new construction now, probably the richest of the rich, right?
And they're holding. I would venture to say, even if they can afford the new construction, they're probably holding on to their money to see what happens.
Yeah,
it gets any worse.
Yes. So I think what's really fascinating is that the ripple effect in the economy is tremendous, as you could imagine, right? We always talk about new home starts and home sales in the United States is one of the leading economic indicators because the pull-through for the entire economy is so massive from, the banking industry being able to facilitate a mortgage.
Doorknobs.
Going to Home Depot and Ace Hardware, one of our sponsors, roofing, right? All of the things that you need to buy a home, and then all of the furnishings that you need for a home when you buy a new home. You're obviously needing a new couch, probably a new bed, probably a number of other things, especially if you're a new couple getting together, which a lot of this in China was people getting married or a man buying a home, empty home, and then finding a bride because he had the home, hoping he would, and then, being able to, she would then furnish that. It's having the impact to the economy in China is devastating, and I'm curious to see how that's going to affect the Congress.
Well, that's what I'm wondering. So you have all of these people looking at their economy literally crumbling.
So is Xi Jinping's coronation inevitable? There's a lot of bad stuff going on that might stop it.
Well, but who is there to stop it?
Well, there are other people that want the gig.
So here's kind of the punchline to this. I'll just leave this with the audience. It's a sobering fact from The Economist. Just 60% of homes that were pre-sold between 2013 and 2020 have been delivered.
Wow.
What percentage?
60%. So 40% have not been delivered.
Think about it. In the United States, if 40% of the homes that were mortgaged and started for consumption didn't happen, there would be riots in the streets in the United States. Anywhere in the Western world.
It's even more severe for China. That's something I wanted to point out, and forgive me, I do not have the actual numbers in front of me, so I'm quoting from some sort of abstract memory. Please correct me if I'm wrong, but the housing industry in China ends up being something totally outsized. I think it's something like 30% of GDP.
Yeah.
Where the housing industry in the United States is still a big part of the economy, but it's something like 5 or 7% of GDP.
Yeah, and all housing, real estate represents 70% of personal wealth in China.
That's just
70.
amazing.
So 7 out of every $10 you have in the bank is in real estate.
So I think it's just worth kind of, because it's such a big number, you can't get your head around it. So from 2013 to 2020, that's 7 years, right? A 7-year period, almost a decade. Just 40%, just 60% of those houses were delivered. 40%
Jeez.
are not, and probably never will be.
And speaking of debt, Jonty,
Yeah, I'm just sort of looking at the clock. Do we want to do a break now? For me to get through all of this in 2 minutes, I don't do hard drugs.
I can do the coal thing pretty quickly.
fire off, Billy.
Okay, so here's the
pun
thing.
intended.
An unspoken truth about climate change in the crusade is anything that we do in the United States and in the Western world will be offset by China, India, and other developing nations who are just polluting the hell out of their landscapes.
But
China's new boom is coal-fired electricity. They're still buying a bunch of coal. They're still mining a bunch of coal, and they're running power plants.
And
with
they're
it.
still building power plants.
That is correct. Now, here's the thing. Under the non-binding 2015 Paris Climate Agreement, China can increase its emissions until 2030. That's written down. It's agreed upon. They can pollute the snot out of their landscape until...
You said they can increase, not flatline, but they can increase.
Yes, they can increase...
keep building power plants.
They can increase their emissions until 2030, and there's no limit on that.
We couldn't buy enough electric cars in this country to offset
China's emissions between 2015 and 2021, last year, increased by 11%.
Billy, where does the smoke go?
Well, that's precisely my point. You know, we were worried when Japan's nuclear reactor went south, and they could read the fallout flying over the west coast of the United States. Well, where do you think all that pollution's coming? Around. If you look at the way the wind patterns are around the Earth, it doesn't take very long for China to pollute us all.
So we're kicking the industry out of America because it's dirty, and
Right.
we're running down to the box store and buying made in China.
Once again, let me conclude my short little presentation here with what I started with. The unspoken truth about climate change and the worldwide crusade behind it is this: nothing the United States does to reduce emissions will matter because it's completely offset by the pollution in China, India, Bangladesh, and a bunch of other countries.
Yeah,
Because
offset's an understatement.
yeah.
But let's take a break.
All right.
I have to jump
on
off
that
the
happy
cliff.
note. On that happy note, we'll be right
Thanks, Billy.
back.
This is Joe Cordell. In other ads, I've talked about the weighty matters that are on the table in divorce: assets, debts, spousal support, and of course, children. But here I want to talk to you about a troublesome issue that arises early and often in the divorce process, but which attorneys, including myself, say too little about, and that's the cost of a divorce. Yet as important as this factor is, it shouldn't overwhelm the more deserving issues that are raised by divorce. But here are just a few things that Cordell & Cordell is doing to help. We have now reduced our initial deposit or retainer. Also, there's no longer a charge for initial consultations for those who retain. And finally, we now provide on the front end a maximum fee pledge for certain modification and support matters. The bottom line is that to be a partner men can count on, we have to think about all their needs, and attorney fees are no exception.
Schedule an appointment with one of Cordell & Cordell's California area attorneys. 1455 Frazee Road, Suite 500, San Diego, California, 92108.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts. I'm Charles Friedman. Before you turn on that air conditioner up to max, give a thought to the safety of all the electrical circuits that keep you cool. Best way to check on the safety of your electrical circuits is with the help of Chris Jensen and the staff at JM Electric. Chris, what should we be watching out for?
Thanks, Charles. It is really important to be mindful of the electrical circuits that power air conditioners. Any electrical leak from these circuits is a real fire danger. You may not be able to see the electricity leaking from the circuits behind your walls, but JM Electric's state-of-the-art testing equipment can find them. And JM Electric is happy to help folks out with a free home assessment to see if the current safe testing service is right for your home. Give us a call at 422-7819.
Go straight to jmelectric.com and take the home electric safety test. After you answer 12 yes or no questions, you'll have a good idea about how safe to feel. If you don't feel safe, call JM Electric and ask for a free current safe home assessment. That's JM Electric at 422-7819. You'll sleep well at night.
Chef Ben here from the Back Nine Grill and Bar at the Pasatiempo exit, where we serve the very best house-ground burgers in Santa Cruz County and possibly the world. Come in Thursday for the Outlaw Burger and a pint for only $15. See you at the 9.
Are you interested in a radio show with tips and tools to help you unravel the mysteries of your personal finances? Would getting a firm understanding of the basic laws of money management help you out? Then listen to Money Moves on Thursday evenings at 7 p.m. Host Pamela Fugit-Hetrick and her guests provide information so that you can successfully manage your own money. Tune in to Money Moves Thursdays at 7 p.m. on KSCO AM 1080 Santa Cruz.
Ni hao ma. Welcome back. This is China Watch Radio, and we are ripping right along with the news of the week. Jonty has a great story. Maybe it's not so great, though. Tell us what's going on with China's relationships with debt and its Belt and Road countries.
Well, we have had a kind of knee-jerk assessment of China's debt relationship with a variety of countries vis-a-vis development, global infrastructure development, wherein we said, well, it's debt trap diplomacy. And I came across two articles, not intentionally at all. I honestly thought they would be reinforcing the kind of thing that we've been saying, but oddly enough, they actually weren't. With a lot of things, it's more complex than you might think at initial examination.
And you're our complexity guy, Jonty.
This may actually be one of those cases. The world desperately needs infrastructure. I think the estimates, depending on who you ask, I think the U.S. government published something saying there's a $40 trillion deficit in investment in global infrastructure. So what we're talking about is all of the ports and railroads and airports and roads and other things that allow the economies of the world to develop to their full potential and lift people out of poverty and all the good that comes along with that. China, as we I think all know at this point in time, launched the Belt and Road Initiative in order to try to fill some of that gap. I think they saw it as an opportunity in a variety of ways. Now, China's commitments in this regard have been about double the U.S. and other major powers. Although I should mention there that just the other day, Biden and the German Chancellor Scholz, they were high-fiving over some new proposal to up the development investment of the United States and the EU to about $600 billion over the next 5 years. So that would be as a direct challenge to China's Belt and Road Initiative. Now, I came across two articles. One of them actually rates countries by how indebted to China they are. And there's two ways that you can look at it: total dollar amount, and then you can also look at percent of GDP. Venezuela owes the most money to China. It's $74 billion. Angola, about $40 billion. Pakistan, about 24. Ethiopia, about 11 billion, and Sri Lanka, a little over $10 billion. So those are the big indebted, the most indebted dollar terms.
Hey, Jonty, can I interrupt you for just a second to ask a question? Let's take Nicaragua's, what you said, 40 billion, something like that?
It was Venezuela.
Venezuela. What is that as a percentage of their yearly?
Yeah, the GNP.
Their GNP.
Exactly. So as a percentage of their GDP, that's not that much. Venezuela, and it's 74 billion for Venezuela. So the other measure is percentage of GDP, where you have the Congo at about 50% of their GDP, and Equatorial Guinea 47-ish. Djibouti, 40%. As we know, Congo has been making a variety of mineral rights deals with China. And Djibouti is the location of China's first official overseas military base. So there does seem to be some quid pro quo there, doesn't it? Yes, that's right.
Okay. So it seems like China, through the goodness of its heart, is identifying those places in the world that have stuff
they
like
need
minerals or ports, and investing heavily in them. Now, how is it this not Belt and Road robbery?
Well, one of the things that they discuss in the next article is specifically about how since the year 2000, China was essentially really excited to go out and give everybody a whole bunch of loans, and the way in which they did it was kind of scattershot, and that you're looking at folks who didn't necessarily have an awful lot of experience with this kind of stuff. So there's a variety of individuals, maybe I'll get to a little later, who go into some more minutia about how, as they have examined it, it actually looks like they didn't know that these places were going to not pay these loans back. But one thing I wanted to also mention is that there's also an amount of sort of hidden debt, because these loans are notoriously opaque. As we know, China has a corruption problem. And if you're giving $1 billion loan to somebody, and you're charging some sort of percentage fee for your services, then, well, you don't necessarily want a whole bunch of you don't want a lot of transparency. You don't want anybody to just go and look at all the details that you negotiated. So there's the kind of surface layer of what we know countries owe to China, and then there's what they actually owe. And according to scholars at the Kiel Institute in Germany, it could be hundreds of billions of dollars more than we're actually aware of.
Ouch.
Yeah. So let me just read something here to point us back to that sort of topic of whether or not this was an intentional strategy to indebt places in order to get political concessions. This is Deborah Bodegam, director of the China-Africa Research Initiative at Johns Hopkins University School of Advanced International Studies. Doesn't sound like a dummy to me. Let's see, what are they saying here? She's talking more about the cancellation of loans. I may have misstepped there, but she is essentially saying, along with Harry Verhoeven, a senior research scholar at Columbia University, New York, and Shahar Hammurati, a political economist from the University of Queensland, they're all saying that these loans were poorly thought out.
Yeah.
They didn't really have the experience with this sort of thing to know if they were actually going to get paid back. And in a lot of situations, I mean, if you're lending people money and they aren't paying you back, you're left holding the bag. There are kind of two categories of loan that they look at here. There's the no interest loans, and then there's the interest loans. So they're also looking at this debt trap debate situation, and China has just recently canceled a whole bunch of loans to various countries. But what they're actually doing there, it's a bit misleading. So they're looking at these no interest loans, which if it's a no interest loan, you're taking a loss basically because of inflation. So they're forgiving these loans, and what they're doing is they're waiting until most of the balance of the loan has been paid off, and then they're canceling the loan when they don't really owe that much. So not a highly. I mean, there's lots of suspect and corrupt things going on here, but at the same time,
Jonty, I have a quick question. When you say that they weren't really planning to lose money and they really, weren't thinking about it, but would not it be a great strategy if you had a country that had something you really wanted to throw money at the least likely to pay the money back so that you can get the resource?
Well, here's the rub on that,
maybe you don't even want to get paid back. Maybe you just want the resource.
There is a legitimate infrastructure need. And if there's a need, there's an opportunity. And the West has really after doing the exact same debt trap diplomacy for many decades under the auspices of the IMF and World Bank, the West really failed to fulfill this need. And China stepped into that realm. Now, the Chinese have a different perspective than most of the West does in terms of developing countries, because China sees these places as market opportunities. There's also places that they can get resources from, but that's how you do business. You sell things to people and you buy things from people. So while China was working to build out all of these ports and infrastructure in different places, they were getting the cold shoulder from the West. And I've always thought this was a place where we've really dropped the ball. So is it fair to say that the only intention was to sort of trap places in debt so that they could get concessions? It's certainly possible that this variety of experts that I've just cited here, who all think that that's in fact not the case, that they might actually have a bit of an argument there. From now on, I'm going to consider this alternate side to the narrative. It might be debt trap diplomacy. It might be greed. It might be stupidity. It might be a legitimate a business wherein you're trying to develop a developing country.
I prefer to think it was out of the goodness of their hearts that the CCP.
But it's a benevolent organization.
Well, here's the thing. I kind of think Jonty's right about all of them. I think all of those things are in play here.
I was going to wind the clock back to the 80s for a minute. And when we look at all of the debt that Wall Street extended and the bank extended down to Latin America.
There you go.
But it was a debt trap, but it was a debt trap back to private financial institutions for the most part, as opposed to being beholden for a government. Now, you could argue that there's some, arm's length, tangible connections that, where the government does get some leverage. But, I mean, for the most part, it was a lot of it was a private financing effort. And Wall Street knew that when they locked the Latin American countries in at a high interest rate, they were pretty much stuck because no one would come and bail them out at a higher rate, given the inflation situation that was within those countries over that period of time. But that ran pretty rampant across all of Latin America, I recall.
So, but Jonty does bring up an interesting thing, because for decades and decades and decades, the West has been throwing money at Africa without anything really to show for it.
There you go.
So who was getting the money?
Hold on, Michael. Time out. The West has been throwing money at Africa.
Mm-hmm. Giving money for various
programs.
Here, take the money, do something, that kind of thing.
There was a lot of hunger initiatives and things, and it was all very questionable what happened to it.
Well, we see. Look,
there's a lot of loans. I mean, there were a lot of loans to African countries. Sorry, Billy.
No.
And then there's also the sort of I'm trying to remember the name of one of those feed all the hungry people in Africa things. So I mean, but that's paltry. We're talking about a multi-trillion-dollar investment in global infrastructure that China's been making over the past 2 decades. I don't know of an equivalent that the West has done anything close to that.
At that level.
And we've hardly been giving.
I don't think so. I don't know of any either, which is why I ask, what have we done with the money?
Well,
I know we've spent a lot of money, but we haven't. Have we built any roads or any dams or any hydroelectric facilities? I don't know.
Around the world?
Have we?
I think the last thing we built around the world that really, the United States paid heavily for was like the Panama Canal.
And that was a while ago.
That was a while
and
back.
Guess who owns that now?
Well,
Yeah, exactly.
I do know I believe it was the world. I think it was the World Bank gave Ghana a loan in order to build a railroad from a gold-producing region to their major port. And the very day that the train arrived, loaded up with gold, to help pay off their very steep interest rate loan, the price of gold mysteriously plunged, and the interest being structured the way that it was, the country was then saddled with debt that they would never be able to pay off, even when the price of gold did recover.
Well, gentlemen, I think we better move on to our next segment here because we burned up all of our time, as we want to do. So, David, you want to start us off on the second segment here? What do we have?
Yeah, let me grab our... So on the G7, topic we've talked about a while back, a couple of months ago, the G7 is actually taking a tougher stance on China trade. And there's a number of moving parts here that I found really interesting. Trades ministers have said that in the G7 that they're going to take a tougher stance on China over trade. At a 2-day meeting in East Berlin, what was formerly East Berlin, Germany, September the 15th, they believe a change is because the countries have become increasingly alerted to Chinese regimes' aggravating behavior in the international community. And I
that's an interesting
well, that's an interesting wake up, isn't it?
Aggravating. Good morning. Wake up.
Yes. So the German Minister for Economic Affairs and Climate Protection, Robert Habeck, told reporters after the meeting that the G7 had agreed to tougher, more coordinated stance against Beijing on trade, and that naivety towards China is over.
There you go. With respect to that, Jonty, goodbye globalization?
Do we want to hear from Billy first about the Solomon Islands?
Okay, Billy?
so you remember back a while back, in April, not too far back, the Solomon Islands signed the security pact with China, and that allows Chinese naval ships to replenish supplies in Oniara. Now, of course, that set off the United States, New Zealand, and Australia concerns about China's growing influence in the region. Mm-hmm. Okay, now, the latest development is this. The Solomon Islands Prime Minister has said that naval vessels from Australia and New Zealand will be exempt from a temporary ban on foreign ships entering the ports of the Solomon Islands. Foreign military vessels responding to a request for assistance from the Solomon Islands government will be exempt also, he added. But here's the kicker. Guess who's not exempt? We, the United States.
So they're kicking us out.
They're kicking us out.
We're not part of the club?
It was kind of funny that the guy actually says we're not singling out the United States.
Yes.
They just are not allowing just the United States to come here.
That's right. So New Zealand can come in because, they've been there when stuff needed to happen. The Australians can come in because, they show up when something needs to be done.
Yeah.
And China can park their ships. But the United States, we don't want your Coast Guard ship. We don't want your British Navy vessel friends there to patrol.
Did they give a reason?
Our paint scheme isn't as nice on our boats.
Yeah, they didn't say, really. They just said, we're not targeting the United States of America, they say. We're in a report on the matter that was expected at the end of next week, of course, never happened. The report was never kicked out. But there's a travel warning released this week. Australia advised about the risk of civil disobedience and unrest in the islands as the Parliament considers significant legislation to try to help them deal with this.
Wow.
So basically, the Solomon Islands are now back in the news because they put the big thumb at the end of their nose and done that thing we all
wavy
did as
fingers,
kids.
yeah.
Wavy fingers,
So it seems to me that China has outflanked us in the South Pacific.
Using the military term.
Navy, yes.
Yeah.
Using the military Navy term, yes, yes,
And
indeed.
we're back to World War II.
Well, we're not actually lobbing Volkswagen-sized missiles at
Not
each
yet.
other. Not yet.
But
Not
people are
yet.
staking out ground.
But we're staking out the turf. Jonty, you ready?
Yeah. So I saw an article called Goodbye Globalization, and I was probably about as excited as Michael was when he saw one that said the wokeism of Maoism. It actually turned out that the author of this article, and I would invite any of our listeners to go and check this out on ChinaWatchRadio.com. Please do sign up for the newsletter while you're there. You won't regret it. The author's actually making an argument for globalization, which made it a bit interesting for me. I tend to have some differing perspectives, and maybe I can illuminate that a little later on. There's lots of very interesting information in the article regardless. This just gives you some perspective on what's going on in the U.S. Vis-a-vis, I believe vis-a-vis largely the neoliberal project, but we can get into that. In January of 2000, 69% of Americans were telling a Gallup poll that they were satisfied with the country's direction. In March of this year, that number's dropped down to 22%.
Ooh. That sounds like the housing market in China. Kaboom.
That's a sea change in how we see ourselves and how we feel about what's happening. The author quotes Glenn Greenwald, who, if anybody's familiar with him, he's a very much a left-leaning politician. Glenn Greenwald argues that the Canadian trucker protests were a long time in the making, saying the underlying discontent reflected mass, widespread anger and even hatred toward the neoliberal ruling class throughout the West, a sentiment that he says was bound to find still more extreme expression.
What is a neoliberal?
Well, that's the million-dollar question. I can send you a photo of one if you're familiar with.
So like piercings and tattoos, or what do we know?
Yeah, a neoliberal is somebody who wants to liberalize global trade, essentially. Who has a lot of faith in laissez-faire economics. Mm-hmm. That is, let's not have government interfering with the economies of the world, and it'll end up being really good for everyone. There were neoliberal sentiments very much within the Clinton administration, and also
in the Bush administration too.
In the Bush, the second Bush administration. But also, you might recall Newt Gingrich having some somewhat neoliberal sentiments at the same time during that era. So it's hardly a Democrat central thing.
And a lot of that came from that big McKinsey report that was paid for by the government in the 90s around free trade. We should go into that sometime. It's kind of a foundation, a predicate for all of this.
It is. I'm going to pick it up, Jonty, and run with the article entitled "America Needs a Proper Strategy for China." There you go.
Wow.
So as we have heard, there's
a lot of a strategy.
There's a lot of drumbeat going on for things kind of separating, and it's us against them. It's like Mao's perpetual war, us against them, and the idea that if China does invade Taiwan, and if things really start falling apart, as they might, what do? Do we have a plan? What will happen to us, for example, if China stops shipping pharmaceuticals, all of our drugs? Where are we going to get our antibiotics or our aspirin or anything? China makes it all. What about the chips that we have in everything, from toasters to business jets?
I just think about all that medication. What a great delivery vehicle if you want to cause mayhem.
Ooh, yeah.
Talk about a weapons
Put
platform.
fentanyl in it all, and away you go.
Yeah.
Right.
Or psychedelics.
So the question is, what are we going to do if there is a decoupling with China? What should our strategy be with China as we are on the precipice of this decoupling? How should we treat this country? Well, how should we react ourselves? What should we do? Do we pick up a shovel and start digging a hole in the ground to build a factory? What are we going to do?
I'm going to do a very horrible, it's the only one that popped into my head just now, but I'm going to try to answer your question. Remember when Europe was being invaded and was being overtaken by the Germans during World War II, and we kept saying, no, we're going to stay out of it. We're going to not, we're not going to participate. It's not our war. Remember that? Mm-hmm. And we kept doing that, and we kept saying that, and pretty much until the Japanese, the partners of the Germans, decided to bomb Pearl Harbor, we sort of stayed away from it. We so can we survive?
We didn't really stay away from it.
No, I understand that, but we didn't officially join the war until we got bombed.
Yeah.
Now, my question is, we were sort of trying to be isolationists at that point, right? Mm-hmm. So let me just ask the question, can we afford to be isolationist?
That's a good question. Absolutely.
Can we do that now? Yeah. Because if we do, we won't get aspirin and pharmaceuticals and chips and all kinds of other stuff.
And following up on that, which country has the most to lose?
That's what I'm saying.
If we decouple.
Yeah, exactly.
Which country is the loser? Will we be the loser?
Well, China will still have aspirin. Yeah. And chips.
Well,
can I go back to Jonty for a second? Because Jonty, I think you had some statistics on this for a while. Wasn't it something like 10% of our economy was dependent on trade with China, but 30% of theirs is dependent with us? You had some statistics I was trying to remember.
No, it's according to Peter Zion, 7% of our GDP is dependent on trade with all other countries, and a lot of that's with Canada and Mexico.
Right.
Only 7%.
Yeah.
Yeah, China ships. It's something like that. I don't know exactly how he's coming up with that number, but if China is shipping $500 billion worth of products into the United States every year, and we're shipping $100 billion to China, and there's a $400 billion trade deficit, then and we have a little over a $20 trillion economy. I think you can kind of rough out a statistic based on that.
It's like 9. Quickly in my brain, it's like 9%, something like that.
Yeah, exactly. So, probably you can find that a lot of that's replaceable.
Yeah. So, in essence, our trade imbalance is such that it would seem like we would do best by not having such a
that's the way, and on the surface, that's what it sounds like.
Because we're talking about...
you'll have to make that argument against the neoliberals. Perhaps we can...
This afternoon, sunny with north-northwest winds 5 to 8 miles per hour, and tonight mostly clear with lows in the mid-50s. North-northwest winds 5 to 10 miles per hour, becoming light and variable after midnight. And tomorrow, sunny with highs in the low 80s in Santa Cruz area. Light and variable wind becoming west 8 to 13 miles per hour in the afternoon. And the high temperatures today higher than they were yesterday, a little bit lower than they're expected to be tomorrow. We do have a high of 85 degrees in Ben Lomond right now. And it looks like 83 degrees in Gilroy, 79 degrees in Santa Cruz and King City, 74 degrees in Watsonville and Salinas, and 70 degrees in Monterey. Time now coming up on 7 minutes after 3 p.m., and that means it's time to return for the second hour of China Watch Radio.
This is KSCO, Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey. China Watch Radio is brought to you in part by Sushi Market Sprouts on 7th in Santa Cruz and Kaito in the Capitol Mall Food Court. Treat yourself to the finest Japanese cuisine you'll find anywhere with fresh sushi to go and delicious ramen dinners. Sushi Market Sprouts and Kaito. Yum!
Ni hao ma, 我们很好. We are Trying to Watch Radio. A whole bunch of us here. We have Susan Simon in the control room here at KSCO. We have Billy Graff running the studio. We have David Welch.
Hey.
We have Jonty McCollyer up in the woods, and yours truly, Michael Olson. Ladies and gentlemen, a very short period of time here, Xi Jinping is likely to be crowned Emperor of China. Of course, he's not going to call it that. He's going to be president for life or president for the third term or whatever.
Dear leader.
Dear leader.
Yeah.
But
Dear leader.
in essence, he will be in total control, 100% total control of China, with the power of reaching into everybody's cell phone in the country and literally turning them off. What an incredible... we've talked about totalitarian dictatorships before, but this is now possible. Total control of everybody in the entire country.
I would remind people that it's one thing to have power, but then he has to hold on to it also, because he is balancing forces within the country, like the military, the business community, the party itself. Mm-hmm. There are opposing forces that he has to somehow keep in alignment.
Well, he's been spending the last decade, 10 years, realigning those possible opposition
packing
parties.
with cronies and things,
and shipping them off to body part factories or something like that. But that's how he's been taking care of all of those people. So, but they still, the competition still emerges. So how is he going to react to those people within China? And how is he going to react to the rest of the world? What is he going to do?
Well,
he can do whatever he wants with his country. And he has been having his way with the world.
Yeah, within limits. I think if he tried to do some stuff that like Vladimir Putin has done, I just don't think the world will let him do it.
I think he's already done those.
Well, he hasn't actually fired on anybody yet. Economically, but not.
If you look at what's been going on in Xinjiang, or with the respect to the Falun Gong, with respect to the Buddhists, respect to the Christians, with respect to anybody who stands opposed to him, it's Custer at the greasy grass time.
Yep.
Yeah.
So, and now
that's the point I hadn't really.
And he has this total control of this country. What is he going to do? He has to do something. He can't just hang around. He's got to do something that's magnificent, because he is magnificent. He's the emperor, right?
You have to stay out in front, and it's still a challenge to stay out in front. I'm reminded of Queen Victoria back when the Brits went to war with the Sudan. In fact, they were dealing with Muslim terrorists,
right?
Back at that time frame. There's the famous book in the movie, The Four Feathers, right? That was kind of about that whole escapade. She didn't want to go to war. In fact, there were a lot of key people in her cabinets who didn't want to engage, but there was such a demand by the military and the public that she was compelled to participate and have this war. And it's just a kind of a reminder that even though somebody's in charge or at the top of the government, there's still a lot of very powerful currents of force underneath you that you have to be able to manage and govern.
Have to go along with that.
Yeah.
Have to figure out how to get along with the entire food chain, and it's a big one in China.
Oh, huge.
Oh, it's huge. So the question is, that we have on the table today is do we have a strategy to deal with China?
Can I put a subtext in that?
Yeah.
Do we have a strategy that has any chance of working to deal with China? Because I think we have a strategy. I just don't think.
What is it?
Well, I think the strategy we've been operating under for 30 years. Oh yeah, we'll help these guys get their economy together, and then we'll all reap the benefits because they'll be a world player, and we'll trade stuff with them. And how to quote Dr. Phil, how's that working for you?
Well, I referred to the McKinsey study earlier, and there was a line in it that was just damning. It said the standards for the American working person will drop. There will be a salary decline. There'll be a decline in overall ability to earn. However, their dollars will go the same distance or further because the products we're going to be acquiring from China will be much cheaper than what we'll be able to manufacture here.
Oh, so I get it. So we'll make much less money because our jobs essentially have gone to China, and we can work at the 7-Eleven.
Yeah.
But it's okay because we can buy.
We can eat the hot dogs made in China.
Yeah, there
There's
you
a
go.
very important chart of inflation, which is not updated. It's from several years ago, but it shows where the inflation has been in the United States. And we have had a dramatic reduction in the cost of plasma TVs and mobile devices and things like that. But housing and healthcare and education and food, everything that essentially you need to live, has been skyrocketing at the same time.
But now we all have flat screen TVs, and there you go. So
maybe it's a plot to make us stupider.
So this is the second hour of China Watch Radio. This is not our hour to blather away. It's your time out there. So pick up your phones and join us today. We're at 831-479-1080, 479-1080. What do you think our strategy should be for dealing with China?
Yes.
We should have a strategy, an immediate strategy for what happens if all of a sudden we no longer are coupled with China with all of our trade,
alternate
and
plan
all
B.
of our money. Yeah, so if all of a sudden we're no longer connected with China, where are we going to get our aspirin and our pharmaceuticals and all of the electric toothbrushes and stuff like that?
Is the G7 taking the right approach by getting tough with China?
Yeah. Or should we be weak with China? Should we give them what they want, as we have been doing for the last 20 years?
Yeah, how's that
There was
working?
actually an argument for that in that Goodbye Globalization article that I mentioned earlier. Let me just quickly read this here. The Institute for International Economics estimates that if the United States ended the trade war with China, eliminated steel and aluminum tariffs, and ended softwood lumber duties on Canada, the inflation rate would be cut by 1.3 percentage points. What do you think, guys? Does that sound like a good deal to you?
1.3, is that all?
Wow.
That's what they're actually saying. Wouldn't that be great if we had 1.3 percentage points less inflation?
I don't know. I don't know if you've tried to buy a hamburger lately.
Anything.
We'll sacrifice our
of
steel and
gas.
aluminum industries in order to reduce inflation by 1.3 percentage points. I'm kind of curious how many jobs would be lost if we ended the trade war. That's just talking about the existing tariffs that Trump imposed.
We should do a show on tariffs sometime. You brought some good points, Jonty. You know, a lot of those tariffs were just absorbed by China. There wasn't a lot of pass through, and what I find
which means that they just paid them and said, okay.
Exactly. What I thought would be interesting is, like, what if our tariff policy with China was built around fairness, equitability, fairness of the workforce, right? Like, can't use slave labor. You have to pay living wages. And there was a tax on products according to their economic environmental impact. So,
isn't there some kind of woke policy called, is it three
ESG.
ESG?
Yes.
What is that?
Environmental, social justice, and governance. So,
okay, yeah.
But that's kind of a. We could do a whole show on that too. It's a lot of. I find that a number
It's
of
a black rock thing.
I've always, the way I've viewed tariffs is this. I think tariffs ought to be performance based.
But I'm thinking,
you know what I mean?
But what if it was performance based, so based on pollution, let's say?
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Right. Yeah. Good job, good Billy. Because if it costs us, X dollars to build, something in this country, and the same product is less because they can use toxic materials and not have to dispose of them properly,
and not leave the
really
lithium
like
dust
that.
laying in the ground and stuff like that.
I really like that, David, because it's going right to this whole kind of nonsensical argument where we have to limit our use of fossil fuels to zero, while at the same time, one of our major geostrategic competitors is building 100 plus gigawatts worth of new coal-fired power plants and has no intention of slowing down.
Yeah, and by treaty doesn't have to do anything till 2030.
They have to think about it till then.
Yeah, by non-binding treaty. Yeah.
That's right. It's non-binding on top of that, right?
So
who
why don't
signed
we
that?
just have tariffs based on CO2? But it doesn't. That sounds a little bit like global cap and trade. There might be reasons to argue against that. I don't know. But why isn't that being applied to communist China?
Sure.
Yeah.
All of these things fit into the question then, what should our strategy be with respect to China? How should we approach this? What happens if they suddenly say, to hell with you, we're out of here?
Yeah, 479-1080 if you have an opinion. I'd love to hear it because my opinion seems to make sense to me, but sometimes it doesn't make sense to anybody else. So anyway, if you'd like to give us a call and give us your opinion, 479-1080 is the number. We're talking about
Is Maoism?
fairness.
Yeah, exactly. Is Maoism wokeism?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Are we becoming woke?
And it's also an unfair situation trade-wise, I think.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a new circumstance either.
No.
But who imposed this?
Well, there you
this
go.
trade system on the world.
Self-imposed.
I mean, there were people who looked at this and thought, if we can talk America out of getting rid of its industry and moving it over to China, we can get a twofer. We can have a lot cheaper stuff, and we can get a foothold in the world's biggest market. So if you're a globalist, and there are a lot of globalists with a lot of money, the best thing in the world to do would be to convince America to give up its industries.
Yep.
Well, it's funny. Earlier today, I was working on a commercial for one of our clients involving some fences. And I thought to myself, one of the things they said in this commercial was good fences, make good neighbors.
Robert Frost.
And I thought to myself, we're so concerned with what's going on in the Ukraine, and we're so concerned about what's going on with China and how they're dealing with the Russians and the rest of the world. And I keep thinking to myself, we really should take care of our neighbors. Mm-hmm.
It seems like we are.
Well, we are sort of, but
we don't have any fences on the border anymore.
Either one, for that matter.
Yeah.
I mean, Canada's never had a fence. Are you kidding? That's the biggest border joke in the world.
Oh, I'm from northern Minnesota, and we would go to the boundary waters canoeing, and we would wind up in Canada. So we're paddling along, and we go with friends or family, right? And all of a sudden, there's a motorboat goes by, and we go, "Where are we on the map?" We're 5 miles inside Canada.
I mean, really.
Yeah.
And so, we attempted to make it fair with
Canadians are always sneaking across the border to get health care.
Well, 80% of Canada is hugged against the northern border of the United States.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and also
Toronto,
the other thing too is,
Montreal.
there's a really famous a friend of mine who talked about a really famous situation that's been going on for years, where you could work at the Windsor, Ontario. It's right across the street from Detroit. Windsor, Ontario, and the American car plants aren't that far apart.
No. Well, that's a lot of Ford's marketing people are in Canada like that.
Yeah.
Right across.
Do you guys want to know BlackRock's Larry Fink's opinion about?
Well, he's the
globalization.
Yeah,
he
I'd love to hear that.
is Mr. Globalization, is he not?
Well, in responding to the scenario vis-a-vis Russia's embroilment in Ukraine, he says that it has put an end to the globalization we have experienced over the last 3 decades.
Russia's invasion of the Ukraine did that?
Yeah. Well, I think we've seen a great deal of evidence for that. With this last meeting of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, with Iran being brought into it, Pakistan becoming much more involved, also with the rapid and dramatic expansion of BRICS to include, I can't even remember now, Saudi Arabia was one of them. And also all of these moves to create alternatives to the dollar that have been coming along quite quickly. Zero Hedge was reporting on a Global Times article. For the sake of our audience, the Global Times is the newspaper spokesman for the CCP. So it's the straight out of the horse's mouth, CCP propaganda.
Probably the dragon's mouth.
And they're saying, well said, and they're saying that they're really pointing at the dollar and saying that this has been an abusive system and its time is over. It's coming to an end.
And with respect to that, therein lies a huge danger to the United States, because in essence we've been living on the fact that we have the world's reserve currency and we can spend and spend and spend without earning. And so essentially we just, when we want something like a $1 trillion bill to go out and have some fun, we do that. Here, have the money.
That's a good point. And then what Johnny brought up also, which is over the arc of my life, if I'm trying to recall this correctly, maybe you guys we can put our minds together. But it seems like the use of sanctions by the U.S. government against individuals and countries has really mushroomed in the last 20 years.
Oh, absolutely.
So the point about being an abusive, it's like rather than engaging the military or engaging other practices or finding allies, we unilaterally use the dollar to go smack somebody in the head.
That's really well put, David. Actually, if you think about it, we come out of the Clinton 90s with this, with our pedal to the metal with globalization and free trade and the World Trade Organization. And we get all of these countries embroiled in economic relationships with the biggest financial and business entities all over the world.
BlackRock.
And then we turn around and we launch the war on terror and what have you. And then we turn the tables and we say, well, guess what, guys? Now that we're in these economic relationships, we can turn them on and off. You have to use our SWIFT banking system if you want to trade internationally. So we have the ability to turn on and off your economies as we see fit, based on whether or not we appreciate your behavior.
Didn't a lot of that happen in Sri Lanka? Isn't that what part of the play there? Did not the world, the globalists go in and say you have to start doing things this way?
I know that in terms of the World Economic Forum, they were holding up Sri Lanka as an example of what could happen, how to do it right, how wealthy they were going to be because they were headed on the path to a zero-emission economy. And in terms of why they crashed, I think that it's one of those situations where there's more complexity than it's easy to sort of
I think they owned a lot of money to China. A ton of money.
They own more internationally. They do own it. They are one of the largest debtors to China, $10 billion, as we discussed earlier. But I believe that's about a third of their international debt.
Well, I see that we have somebody that was brave enough to call us at 831-479-1080 and take on the wolves in the wolf
sheep's clothing.
Yeah, there you go.
Joe in Santa Cruz, you're on China Watch Radio.
Hey, Joe.
Hey, so you had 3 comments. Okay, you guys already mentioned the tariffs, and I didn't hear that. Are all the tariffs still in place, or did the morons in Washington, D.C. rescind any of them against China?
Good question. Last I heard, he was considering ending them.
But he didn't, I don't think.
No. We kept the tariffs, but remember, Biden came up with that list of exceptions. So it was get in front of the cameras, tell everybody I'm tough on China, we're not ending the tariffs, and then, afterwards go and say, well, we're going to make these exceptions for this industry and this industry.
And it was a long list.
Yeah, I think it was like 400 entries.
Okay, so that's a good step. At least they're still lingering. Okay. The other thing that I was thinking, which is not going to happen, since the feds are throwing all this tax money all over the place, could we do public service announcement to say maybe tactfully, if you're going to buy an item, could you kind of please buy items that are manufactured in, I don't know, any other place than China? because it might help us in the long run. I know that's not going to happen, but...
And why would it not happen?
Oh, because it's politically incorrect to single out China.
Yeah, it's racism.
Right. How can you say, don't buy from China, and the business people aren't going to like that, so that's not going to happen. Be nice since they're whatever. The other comment I have is, we all know who Ken Burns is, right? He's done the history of Vietnam, baseball, all that.
Yeah.
And now he's doing the Holocaust. Okay, it was a horrible time in the 30s and 40s. We've all heard it. Why can't he do something on the impact of China on the world today? That would open
He's
up
probably working on it. I wouldn't doubt it.
Wait a minute. Who needs Ken Burns when you have China Watch Radio?
Our video portion isn't working too well right now.
Thank God, because we all have faces for radio, but not for TV.
Speak for yourself. My wife says I'm handsome. Billy's looking at me. You kidding me?
I said nothing.
No, your face said everything.
We are on YouTube and Rumble for the sake of our audience, and you can find us on both those platforms.
Okay. But no pictures, right?
Or just pictures.
Well, that's all I got now, so you guys
Well,
can
hey,
continue on.
thank you very much for
Joe,
joining
thanks
us.
for
Really
calling.
nice, and I'm so happy that you had the courage to call 479-1080. Really appreciate it.
Joe did make an interesting point, though. There are so many ways that we can find out about different situations around the world when it comes to how economies bounce off each other and everything. And it's kind of gotten to the point where it's so convoluted that it's who you've read, whatever economic book you've read recently is sort of the one you're going to believe, because I can't hardly believe that we're trying to, not we, but the world is trying to replace the dollar as the de facto trading venue around the world. What are they going to replace it with?
Yeah.
The euro?
Yeah.
The yuan?
That's a whole discussion, and I can tell you exactly what they intend to replace it with. I'm not sure. We don't need to go to a break, though.
Yeah, you can do it in 8 seconds.
No, I tell you what, hold on to that one, and we'll come back to you, and you can explain how that works, because it's fascinating to me.
831-479-1080, and everybody else out there can jump in too.
All right, we'll be right back.
Satisfy your hunger with a fresh, prepared, twice-daily grab-and-go sushi you'll find waiting for you at Sushi Market Sprouts, 2 blocks from the beach at 300 7th Avenue in Santa Cruz. Fresh, delicious, and oh so good.
Hello, I'm Junko, and I look forward to serving you at the Sushi Market Sprouts.
It's the 2022 California International Air Show, October 8th and 9th. After 11 years, the Canadian Snowbirds jet team perform at the Salinas Airport. Experience the power of the latest Air Force fighter jet, the F-35A Lightning II. For the first time in Salinas, the world's fastest jet fire truck. Don't miss the dueling monster trucks. And backed by demand, the Wall of Fire. The California International Air Show. Get your tickets today at salinasairshow.com.
History this rich must be preserved, and the best way to preserve it is to attend the Monterey County Historical Society's 89th anniversary celebration barbecue September 18th from noon to 4 at the historic Baronda Adobe in Salinas. Enjoy a delicious tri-tip meal with baked bean salad, garlic bread and libation, music by the Trail Ride Band, opportunity drawing, book sale, cake walk, and flea market. Tickets $40 for adults, $10 for children at the Adobe, and all proceeds go to preserving Monterey County's rich history.
Hi, I'm Sam Quinn for Coast Paper and Supply. Founded over 60 years ago, Coast Paper and Supply continues to be the one-stop local supply source for businesses, large and small, school districts, special events, and for your home. Their 1,800 square foot showroom is huge, and it's packed with everything from paper and janitorial supplies to whatever you need for shipping and packing, no matter if you're moving your business or your home across town. They've even got motel-hotel amenities, disposable food service items, and even eco-friendly cleaning supplies. Discover for yourself why many local businesses, schools, and people go to Coast Paper and Supply for selection, low prices, and great customer service. You can find Coast Paper and Supply at 151 Josephine Street, open 8 to 4:30 weekdays. You can shop online at coastpapersupplyinc.com or give them a call at 831-423-3350.
You took a new job in Texas. No problem. Store your stuff at Anbar Self-Storage in U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24-hour security. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Store it at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom. Clean it out, pack it up, and drive it right to your door at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul. Easy off Highway 1 on Airport Boulevard by the airport. 24-hour security, 24/7 access. Spring cleaning special. First month free. Store it at Anbar Self-Storage and U-Haul in Freedom.
I love this song! I love nachos.
Loving everything? You might be buzzed.
You know what I'd love? A ride when it's time to head out.
If you see a buzz warning sign, call for a ride when it's time to go home. Buzz driving is drunk driving. A message from NHTSA and the Ad Council.
Welcome back. This is China Watch Radio. Today we're picking up all kinds of different stories out of China, laying them on the table for your consumption and consideration. And when I'm sure you've had all the time in the world that you needed to consider everything, so pick up your phone and join us. 831-479-1080. Question on the table today is, what should our strategy be in dealing with China? What do you think? Should we be tough? Should we be loose? Should we give them everything they want? Should we stand up to them and
make a muscle?
Make a muscle, yeah. What should we do?
Give them a dirty look. Hey, before we went to commercial break, we promised Jonty we would give him a chance to explain what we were.
He's going to tell us where we're going with the money. Instead of the dollar, we're going to do what, Jonty?
Well, I don't see that the dollar is going to just vanish overnight, but I can tell you what Putin was proposing at the BRICS meeting, which was, maybe like a month and a half ago? What he said was BRICS, in case you're not familiar with it, this is Brazil, India, China, Russia, and South Africa. Something all of these countries have in common is that they export commodities, raw materials. China, maybe not so much as the others, but China has rare earth minerals, of course, a couple other things. Right now, oddly, they're exporting natural gas to Europe, believe it or not. But at any rate, so what Putin said is, there's the gold standard idea. But he said instead of a gold standard, a better idea is to sort of put all of these different commodities together, including gold, and have them all create a sort of balance of value together. So
a basket of financial commodities, financial instruments, right?
That was the precise translation of what he said. That hasn't arrived quite yet. What has been happening is a variety of countries have been willing to purchase commodities in rubles. I've actually seen more action with that than I have with the yuan. China has sort of tried to do a digital currency thing vis-a-vis WeChat for some time, as we've discussed in the past. How all throughout Southeast Asia, including Australia, you can walk into a hotel and pay for your hotel bill using your WeChat application. That's not quite the same as a currency that could be used for any sort of meaningful trade, but it's something that's, I think, sort of inevitable at this point in time. The die has been cast. We keep talking about if China and the United States decouple, and I really think we have to stop doing that, guys. We're in the decoupling right now. It is happening right now. The businesses are just
game on
China like crazy.
Game on.
It's happening.
Yeah.
So what we really should be talking about is how are we going to handle this decoupling? And Michael, you brought up that very interesting article earlier. America needs a proper risk strategy for its relations to China, begging the question, do we have a strategy? That article, as I recall, seemed to sort of say, no, we don't have a coherent strategy, but yet we do have a whole lot of economic moves being made from within the actions of the federal government. We've had the CHIPS Act, which is reshoring we were already reshoring high-end microchip manufacturing, but that's got I can't remember, it was like $40 billion boost.
Now, what the article really said is that we don't have a strategy. We have a lot of reactions to things happening.
That's correct.
So somebody makes a move, and we go, well, I'll do that. And another, China makes another move, and well, we'll do that. So we do not have a well-conceived and coordinated strategy to manage our world.
Yeah. Checkers game.
Yeah, so we're playing checkers, and they're playing three-dimensional chess.
Well, I was just going to say that sort of begs the question again: Does Xi Jinping have a proactive strategy? It seems to me like he's on his back foot in a desperate situation here. I mean, they're in a major economic crash right now.
They are in a major economic crash.
I agree with what you just said there, Jonty. Anytime you've got a government that has a powerful person at the top, they look implacable. And you've always liked quoting Sun Tzu, Michael, which is, I think, was spot on for this, which is they project a strength and a power that they don't necessarily have. There's a good fake-out game going in their court.
Well, let me point something out here.
Do we have a phone caller?
We do. Okay. I'll get to him in just a minute.
831-479-1080.
If we decide to bring, onshore stuff again, is it in the United States' interest to onshore something like steel manufacturing? I would like to see, because we made the finest steel in the world for a while.
I agree with Donald Trump, who said a nation does not have steel does not have an industry.
Well, no, I understand that, but the political climate we have now, oh God, we can't pollute. Steel pollutes a little bit because there's a lot of.
But we can buy steel from China that does not pollute because we don't see it.
You're misunderstanding the question here. I understand fully the situation we've got going on now, but politically, could we fire up Bethlehem Steel again? I mean, would the people in Flint, Michigan, would the people in Flint, Michigan, who had some water problems?
Yeah. Also, too, we've had our steel industry went through the world steel industry went through a transition post World War II because everybody had bombed out and flattened. Like Japan, when they came back, their steel was great. Same with South Korea.
Because we built their steel plants.
Well, and they were new. Our plants were built in 1900, and they had been, they've had some upgrades and retrofits to them, but they were old plants, and they really couldn't hold the tolerances. There was a lot of problems with those
wait a
plants.
minute, though. I'm going to say something because I did some research on this a long time ago when I was a little kid when when I did research the Golden Gate Bridge. The Golden Gate Bridge is still standing all these years later because it was built with good old American steel.
Oh, I'm not arguing that point at all. I'm just saying our mills got tired, and there wasn't the will to go back, and they also polluted a lot. There wasn't the will to go in and spend all this money when they could just buy the steel from Asia out of a modern plant.
Yeah, but you get what you look what you.
Oh, I agree with you. Steel should be made here.
Substandard steel is substandard steel.
I agree.
But if you look at the argument for neoliberalism, it says what we need to do is we need to decrease production costs. And the way that you decrease production costs is you go to you get across the board, whatever country, exactly, whoever is willing to pollute the most and pay their laborers the least. And the reason why you shift from that to a protectionist model is precisely because you can use some government intervention, some government tariffs or whatever protectionism form it takes, incentives, you name it, in order to create the situation where it would make financial sense to reinvigorate your industry base, the steel industry being the example.
Okay, I get it. Anyway, we have a phone caller. Let's go to who is that? Colonel Terry on line 1.
Hey, Terry.
Yeah, you're asking what our strategic smart position would be.
Yes.
The big picture and specific are obviously we should be strong and consistent and, provoke truthful recognition of reality. And the reality is the Chinese Communist government is tyrannical, it is abusive, it is a threat to its neighbors, such as Tibet learned. And they also have cheated for 40 years in international trade and stealing intellectual property from us and so forth.
Yeah.
And we should confront that facts about them constantly in our information. I hate to use the word propaganda, but information about reality and the facts. And likewise, we should display. We know how they've imposed their tyranny of the Communist Party on China and Hong Kong and everywhere else. And we should, third, promote that the Chinese people become liberated from the tyranny of the Chinese Communist Party.
No,
and fourth,
Ooh, that's wicked right there.
Yeah.
And fourth, we've got to get our strategic requirements, such as chip building, back in the USA, for crying out loud.
Absolutely.
Okay, I mean, it's so strategically stupid not to do so, including steel making.
Yeah.
Okay, my point.
No, Terry, I got a question for you. So, especially that last point, I really agree with you. Although I don't really argue with anything that you've said there. Joe Biden recently said on the 60 Minutes interview that we would commit American troops to defending Taiwan if it were attacked. Do you think? I just got a question for you. And I don't necessarily disagree with that position, but I'm not sure what to think. Has that always been, do you think, the hip pocket position that we haven't exposed, that's always been the U.S. position? It's just finally we've had a president kind of willing to come out and take a foot forward?
Well, from my own perspective, decades ago, having been on Pentagon contingency planning teams,
that's right,
including about responding to the attack on Taiwan and South Korea and elsewhere, did we learn nothing from Adolf Hitler?
About appeasement, yeah.
Yeah, that was my point earlier in the program.
Okay, now, and we should make it very clear that and we should promote that Taiwan is an independent nation. Let them have a plebiscite in Taiwan. It will show that clearly it will result in the Taiwanese declaring they want to remain independent. And they ask the United Nations to respect that, and us and others to help enforce it and defend it. And we should arm Taiwan defensively so it's like a porcupine.
Yeah, in fact, we were reporting last week that, I think it was last week, the week before, that we're 3 years behind on supplying the weapons that we've already sold them, which is tragic.
So, Colonel Terry, I have a quick question, too. And like most people in this room here, I agree with you on everything you said with respect to China. But my question is, how are we to accomplish those things when China has captured so many of our elite in so many positions of power?
Good question.
That they are simply not of a mind to allow for those things. So
you're referring to idiots like Wendy Sherman, our Deputy Secretary of State. You know about Wendy?
I do not.
Wendy's the lady who caved into North Korea, so they went ahead with nuke program. Wendy caved into the Iranians. She's been around. She's a Democrat, flighty, that's been around several administrations.
Well, I'm also talking about the captains of industry and finance and entertainment and sports and media, news, and all of those key players that have been captured by China with the promise of money and more money than you can possibly imagine.
And get to sleep with Fang Fang or Fin Fin or whatever her name is. Yeah.
And so those people have been, literally, they're properties of the CCP. And they probably are willing to, do token moves. But you're talking about major moves. You're talking about bringing steel back to the United States.
Let's talk about being bold.
Holy smokes.
Like you guys are properly doing. Recognize the reality and the facts about the threat that Red China is.
Yep.
Across the board. From steel to nuclear weapons to aircraft manufacturing and to trade arrangements. And again, we've got to have an information campaign to educate the American public about the realities of that threat, and that we must be strategically strong and responsive, economically, militarily, diplomatically, and so forth. And Taiwan could be an example. And us defending Taiwan in all the ways I've mentioned, information campaigns, plus arming it to the teeth, could result in the Chinese mainland having a change in support among their population.
There you go. Colonel Terry, it's so much fun to agree with you.
Yes. Thanks for the call, Terry. We got a full board.
I only call in to say smart things.
Thank you.
All right. On that note, let's talk to Jan, who's calling us from the San Lorenzo Valley. Hi, Jan.
Hi there, gentlemen. I came up with an idea that we have all these people streaming across the border, and if we could open up some of these factories and industries and give them a job, we'd know where they were. We could start making our own products so we wouldn't have to buy things from China. And it would kind of, resolve a couple of problems. And I think it would be a smart way to go until we figure out what we're going to do with all these people.
Well, that's kind of what we did back in 1900, right?
Yeah. And don't you think that's why the gates are open?
It could be, but nobody's organizing this, and it's causing chaos. And the only thing I can think of is to give them a job, give them a salary, teach them English, teach them, to make something productive, teach them some pride in this country, and get them on our side.
I'm for that. I'm for that. But wait a minute. Chaos is one of the aims of the rules for radicals.
That's right. They want
if you want some Mao's wokeism, chaos is the goal. That's what you want. Yeah.
Well, they want to keep us stressed out. So what we need to do is de-stress. We need to become a team, the American team, where we look at each other, we smile, we say hello, we help each other out when we need help, we let somebody in the lane when they need to merge, we help, we take care of our kids, our families, we get our education straightened out. We need to rejuvenate this whole country.
Wow,
Make America great again?
Yeah.
Yes, make America great again.
I love the sentiment.
Get back our way of life. Get back our country.
So you're saying get back to the basics.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's build our own products, and China is going to take care of themselves.
Amen. Thank you for the call.
Yeah,
great call.
Thank you.
That's a 3-pointer.
Thank you.
Yeah, 3-pointer.
It's a Splash Brothers phone call. All right, let's talk to Mike in Santa Cruz. You're on China Watch Radio.
Hi, guys. Thank you for taking my call. Great show today.
Sure.
I have to disagree with Terry. I think it would cost a tremendous amount of money in arms, which are already somewhat depleted, and we still would lose Taiwan. And I agree with Kissinger that we shouldn't change. Kissinger's always supported a one-China policy, and I agree with that. I see no reason for us to defend Taiwan against China. And I don't see a downside to it, because we could do anything here as good as or better than them that we buy from them. So I'd like to hear you guys tell me on that. What's the downside? What's the big problem with China taking
the
Taiwan?
entire Pacific Basin?
Yeah, the Pacific Basin is the concern, I think, here. The reason why we're willing to defend Taiwan and even think about it is because if Taiwan goes down in flames to mainland China, then Japan's next, and South Korea's next, and
Australia, and the whole world.
It turns into a big, giant problem.
Well, I think the military issue there I would look at more like this. Right now we have freedom of navigation, international rules through the South China Sea. And if China takes Taiwan, then they're in a position to actually decide what trade is and isn't allowed through that vital economic region, specifically to South Korea and Japan. Yep. The other countries maybe are a little bit secondary in terms of economic terms.
We've always protected shipping routes historically, though, for a long time. I think that would be a much easier battle to fight and win than defending Taiwan.
Well, the challenge is, though, that they can project power from land into the shipping lanes, so it makes it really difficult for us to float a navy continuously in those lanes to fight them. We wouldn't have the resources aboard ship to have a sustained engagement.
But you know what? You get 3 points too for disagreeing with us.
Yeah.
Do you guys believe we could actually win that? Defend Taiwan from China, keep them independent. Do you actually believe we could win?
I do.
Absolutely.
Really?
Absolutely.
I'm not seeing it. All right. Well, thank you for taking my call.
All right.
Yeah, thank you. 3-point call.
Yeah, that
I
was
want
a
to
3-point
mention on that call, he talked about Henry Kissinger. I just want to mention that Henry Kissinger just met with Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi on Monday to high five each other.
A great friend of China.
And he's very much considers him a friend of the Chinese people, as I believe he put it, and congratulated him on his upcoming 100th birthday.
So we have Buster in, where is Buster? Santa Cruz.
Hey,
You're
Buster.
on China Watch Radio.
Hey, guys, what a great subject. You got me really thinking. Now, here's what's going on through my brain. I'm convinced as you suggested, they've infiltrated our inner system already, right?
Oh, yeah.
Okay, we agree there. Now, this makes me think this is an absolute no-win. Either way, we're gonna come out of this really messed up. And I don't know how bad it really is. I'm not an expert. Colonel Terry probably knows way more than I do. But my gut feeling is I would not put too much money on what Biden's saying. I really don't think at the end of the day that we're going to risk U.S. security over Taiwan. What do you think?
My opinion has always been that Joe Biden is one of the elite that has been captured by China. Now, other people don't think that, but I do. If such is indeed the case, I don't think he's going to stand up to China. I think he will give lip service to the fact that we're going to go kick some butt, but I think that China has its way with Joe Biden.
If it was literally Joe Biden versus Xi Jinping in the ring with boxing gloves on, I think we'd be in some serious trouble. But we have a defense apparatus in the United States that has its own form of intelligence and decision-making ability, which thankfully goes far beyond the capacity of our current quote-unquote commander-in-chief.
Yeah, I think any of the plans to engage around Taiwan have been hardened for a very long time, and I think they just get modified.
Japan.
And around Japan and South Korea, yeah, Billy, good points. They've been hardened for a long time. They get augmented as new weapons platforms and new opposing capability.
And we have
comes
fantastic military presence in that area.
Yeah,
it's worth noting that Taiwan can hit Beijing with conventional missiles, and Taiwan could put together a nuclear weapon in a couple weeks.
Yeah,
there you go. So we have a divergence opinion. What do you think?
Yeah. If I may suggest some of the ways that we may start to put our feet in the right direction. Yeah. I mean, just a quick case study, for instance. Switzerland. Switzerland has certain things that they're doing. Of course, borders. And, I like to make a joke of it. I don't mean to be inhumane, but the joke I like is, it's real difficult to sneak into Switzerland. I mean, they got the guards all over the place, So
every adult has a gun.
Well, I was staying at a friend's house in Switzerland, and the bedroom closet laying against the wall in the corner is a Sig Sauer fully automatic rifle.
Yep.
Stack of magazines.
That's what I'm talking about. So what happens is, and I made this up, okay, but it's funny. Every now and then you get some guy that sneaks over, right? And you can see how some citizen all decked out in armor comes over, goes, hey, nice hole you just dug. Gives him a lunch and a bottle of water and goes, back over there and fill that hole while you're at it. And I don't mean mean. I'm just trying to be funny. Yeah. But, we got to go back to simplicity. I really suggest we got to go back to the farms. All the small farms. We can put so many people together.
And you know how to do that? Take the 2x2 pledge, and it'll happen just like magic.
Oh, yeah.
Buster, hey, we got to try to get to a couple other calls before we end the show today. Thanks for calling.
You guys are great. Right on. Thank you.
Appreciate it, man.
All right, let's go to Matthew in Boulder Creek. You're on China Watch Radio.
Hey guys, how's it going?
Good.
Okay, so my question for defending or for going to war with Taiwan is: do you think that the American populace would be willing to send their sons and daughters to die for it? So if you frame it that way, do you think people here would actually want their sons and daughters to die for that?
Only if we get
it's so far removed, right?
Only if we get smacked, as we were on Pearl Harbor. You know, there has to be some kind of egregious thing that happens.
But we would get economically smacked so hard, we'd be driven into probably depression in this country if we lost the resources from Taiwan back to the United States.
Not only Taiwan, but I think South Korea and Japan are the
Pacific
two.
Basin.
Yeah, the Pacific Basin is what we're worried about. We're not just worried about defending Taiwan. If Taiwan gets attacked by mainland China, it's that's the focal point. But that's not what we're worried about.
That's a really good point as well, Billy. You know, as all of these countries are fleeing from China, a heck of a lot of them are going to Vietnam. If there's a war in the South China Sea, good luck, exercising trade with Vietnam.
Good reminder, Jonty.
What I would see is, I would imagine that there would be a huge brain drain going on in Taiwan, and to speak of the economics of it, I think that I know Intel's already trying to move a lot of their fabs over here into Arizona, but I think it's one thing if China takes, especially on the global scale, it's one thing if China takes Taiwan, but for them to start bullying Japan, South Korea. I think on the global popularity of that would decrease a lot. Right? I mean,
they are already doing it.
Yeah, they're already
in a very soft sort of way.
Boiling the frog approach.
It's exactly.
Yeah.
They're
putting great
doing
economic pressure on Japan right now.
Yeah.
Well, we got a minute.
1 minute. Wow. Thanks for the call. And thank you all out there for tuning in to China Watch Radio. Remember to tune in the website at ChinaWatchRadio.com. Sign up for the email.
And the letter.
Newsletter. Newsletter. And read the articles. And join us next week for another edition of China Watch Radio. Who knows where we'll be next? Isn't it incredible the amount of how this thing is just coming to a boil?
Well, I'm interested as we come up to the precipice here of the National Congress elections in China.
Gonna be heavy.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us today. We greatly appreciate it. Everybody have a great week. This is KSCO, Santa Cruz, Salinas, Monterey.